When a woman goes silent after giving her all, after trying, explaining, giving second chances, forgiving things she shouldn't have, when she finally stops trying, it is not out of pettiness. It's not because she suddenly doesn't care. It's because she's realized something deep. Silence is the loudest message she'll ever send, and the truth is that message cuts deeper than any conversation, argument, or breakdown ever could. You see, men are conditioned to notice noise. They expect reactions. They expect the text after the fight, the call after the disappointment, the emotional explanation after the cold behavior. They expect to be chased, to be pulled back in, to be asked, what's wrong? They know how to handle that. They know how to respond to that. But what shakes them, what haunts them, what makes them sit up at night scrolling through old photos, reading old messages, wondering what happened, is when you say absolutely nothing. That is the moment everything shifts. Because silence doesn't just say, I'm done. It says, you're not worth my peace. It says, I've stopped giving you access to my energy. And to a man who once had your full attention, your full heart, your daily effort, your consistency, that silence is deafening. It leaves space for him to replay every single moment he thought he had time to fix, every chance he took for granted, every time you forgave when you shouldn't have. Now he's left alone with those memories, those decisions, and they don't fade. They grow louder in the quiet. When a woman stops explaining, stops trying to be heard, stops waiting for the other person to care, she is reclaiming her power in the most graceful way possible. She's not trying to hurt him. She's choosing not to hurt herself anymore. That's a shift many men don't expect, because they're used to the drama, the noise, the back and forth. But silence, that unsettles them. It creates an open loop in their mind that never truly closes. He starts checking your stories, watching who you're with, noticing when you post, seeing you smile and wondering if he was ever the reason or now just a forgotten chapter. He won't say anything. He might even pretend to have moved on. But in the quiet, behind the pride, behind the silence on his end, is a loud panic. Why did she stop? He won't admit it, but that silence will echo in his mind when he's out with someone new and she doesn't laugh the way you did. When he hears your favorite song on the radio, when he walks past that place you used to go, when he opens his phone and scrolls past your name, but doesn't have the courage to press it. It's not just silence to him anymore, it's absence. And absence has a way of revealing everything presence tried to cover up. This is where your strength is born, not in making him feel bad, not in proving a point, but in choosing yourself so completely that his confusion becomes his teacher. Silence becomes your boundary. It becomes your proof that you no longer beg for love, you no longer plead to be seen, and you no longer argue with someone who made you feel invisible in the first place. Let him wonder. Let him feel the weight of what he lost without having to say a word. That's how you make an impact. That's how you reclaim your worth. Not with noise, but with peace. Because when you finally stop trying, the silence becomes a symphony he'll never forget. There's something profoundly unsettling to a man when the woman who once cared so deeply suddenly doesn't reach out anymore. Not because she's trying to manipulate him, not because she's playing games, but because she's exhausted. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually, she's done. And when a woman reaches that point, the energy she used to pour into the relationship is no longer accessible to him. And that loss is not just felt, it lingers. Men rarely notice the little withdrawals at first. They don't notice when you stop texting good morning, when you stop checking in, when you stop double texting just to keep the connection alive. They think you're just busy, distracted, maybe even moody. But what they don't realize is that your silence is not sudden, it's built over time. It's a quiet accumulation of every moment you felt ignored, every time your presence was taken for granted, every little instance where your love was mishandled. You used to give freely, You used to initiate. You used to explain yourself in hopes he would understand. But one day you woke up and realized no amount of trying can fix someone who doesn't see your effort. So you stopped. And when you did, a subtle shift happened. He began to feel the absence of what he once assumed would always be there. Now he starts to pay attention. He starts watching. Who are you with now? Who's making you laugh? Are you missing him the way he's suddenly starting to miss you? It creeps up on him slowly. At first, it's just curiosity. But that curiosity turns into confusion, then anxiety, then regret. Because when a woman stops trying, it creates a mirror that shows him who he really was when he had access to you. And oftentimes, that reflection isn't pretty. He remembers how you cared, how you always followed up, how you were consistent even when he was distant. And now, nothing. No call, no text, no message to say, I miss you. And it messes with him because for the first time, he realizes you were the glue. You were the connection. You were the one who held it together. And now that you've stepped back, the whole dynamic has shifted. This kind of silence isn't passive, it's powerful. It's not just space, it's presence removed. It's the realization that his name no longer sits at the top of your priorities, that he's no longer the first thought when you wake up, that your healing has begun, and it doesn't include keeping the door cracked open for someone who walked out willingly. He may not say anything, but he feels everything. Every picture you don't like, every post you don't comment on, every milestone he no longer hears about. It's a subtle sting, but it deepens with time. Because he never thought you'd stop. He thought you'd always try. He thought you'd always reach back, but you didn't. And that silence, it says more than your words ever could. And now, every time he checks your profile, he's not just looking for updates. He's looking for signs that you still care, that maybe, just maybe, he still matters. But all he finds is stillness, a stillness that speaks, I cared enough to let go. And that will haunt him, not because you hurt him, but because he finally feels what you felt all along. Unseen, unheard, alone. And that's the lesson in your silence. It isn't about revenge. It's about release. It's not about making him suffer. It's about choosing not to suffer anymore. And the moment you did, everything changed. There's a different kind of weight that falls on a man when he realizes you've stopped waiting for him to change. That shift isn't loud. It's not dramatic or explosive. It's silent, but it echoes. Because when a woman decides to stop hoping, stop begging, stop holding on to potential, it disrupts the illusion he had about time, about her, about the belief that she'd always be there, always be trying. He's confused because for so long, you were the one who tried to make things work. You were the one who forgave easily, the one who bent over backwards to keep the connection alive, even when it felt one-sided. He came to expect your patience. He relied on your emotional endurance. He knew you'd show up, no matter how many times he pulled away. But something changed. And it wasn't something you announced. It was something you decided. And that decision to stop waiting for him to evolve, to finally meet you where you already stood, shakes him more than any confrontation ever could. Because he starts to realize he's been living on borrowed time. Your love was consistent, yes, but it was also conditional, whether he noticed or not. It was held up by your hope, by your belief that maybe one day he'd get it, that he'd stop taking you for granted, that he'd grow, that he'd listen, that he'd value your presence the way you valued his. But when you stopped waiting for that day, he felt the shift. The tone of your silence changed. It wasn't cold, it was just final. Not angry, just indifferent. You stopped reminding him, you stopped explaining, you stopped reaching, and suddenly he was left with the space he always thought he wanted, and it felt nothing like freedom. It felt like loss. You see, he was never really afraid of losing you when you were chasing him. He was afraid of what it would feel like when you stopped. When you stopped hoping he'd show up different. When you stopped shrinking yourself to make room for his indecisiveness. When you stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt. And now he's not just missing you, he's missing the version of himself you believed in, the one you waited for, the one you saw underneath the inconsistency and the fear, the one you kept fighting for long after he stopped fighting for the relationship. That version haunts him. Because without you, that version of him doesn't exist. Your silence shows him something he never saw clearly when you were still holding on. It shows him how much power you had, not in control, but in presence. It was your presence that made the connection feel alive. It was your hope that gave him space to be better. But now that you're not holding that space, he feels the emptiness. And it's not just about you not being there. It's about what your absence represents. It represents that he waited too long, that you grew tired, that he thought you'd never leave. And now he's learning what that assumption cost him. He's not haunted by your anger. He's haunted by your peace. The kind of peace that says, I've let go. And that peace, that calm detachment, is more powerful than any argument or goodbye. Because when a man realizes the woman who once prayed for him, rooted for him, and believed in his potential is no longer waiting for him to catch up, he doesn't just miss her. He misses the opportunity to rise with her. And deep down, he knows he let it pass. And that knowledge, it lingers longer than your love ever could. Sometimes the loudest message you can send is your absence. When you stop trying, stop reaching out, stop explaining yourself, something shifts inside him. And it's not always immediate. At first, he may feel relief. He may convince himself that the silence means peace, that it means space. But what he doesn't realize is that your silence is not a break. It's a boundary, a decision, a declaration that you've stopped accepting less than what you deserve. You see, people get comfortable with your effort. They come to expect your consistency. He grew used to the way you were always the one to fix things, the way you'd always return, always initiate the healing. He didn't realize how much of the emotional weight you were carrying until you decided to stop. And now, when you're no longer fighting to keep the bond intact, when you're no longer chasing his attention, he's forced to face something he never prepared for, himself. He's not just haunted by your disappearance. He's haunted by the contrast. Because now every moment of silence from you reminds him of the moments you used to show up. Every day that goes by without your energy reminds him of how much you used to pour into the relationship. And now that the well is dry, he's thirsty. But here's the thing. He doesn't know how to refill it because he never learned how to pour into you the way you poured into him. And that's what truly eats at him. He's not just missing the comfort of your presence. He's realizing how much work it took to love him. Work that you did quietly and consistently. Work that he didn't notice until it stopped. It's like someone turned off the music at a party. Suddenly the room feels empty. The laughter fades. The joy disappears. Not because you took it, but because you were it. And now that you're no longer trying, the silence reveals what he refused to see. It was never mutual. There's a unique kind of regret that comes from realizing you mistook loyalty for weakness. That's the regret he's now learning to sit with. He thought you'd always try, always stay, but when you stopped, it didn't just disrupt the pattern, it dismantled the fantasy. The illusion that he was in control, that he could push and pull and you'd bend but never break. But now he sees you didn't break, you let go. And that's even more powerful because letting go doesn't mean you gave up. It means you chose you. It means you finally understood that trying too hard for someone who's not meeting you halfway isn't love. It's self-abandonment. And you're done abandoning yourself for someone who couldn't see your worth when it was standing right in front of him, showing up day after day. So now, every moment he checks his phone and sees nothing from you, every time he thinks about reaching out but doesn't know what to say, every time he wonders if you've moved on, he feels it, the weight of your absence, the sting of your decision, and it's not just haunting him. Because when someone stops trying after giving their all, that silence speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. He never thought you'd actually stop. He assumed you'd always be there, maybe frustrated, maybe hurt, but still present. He counted on your love being louder than your boundaries. And now, with every quiet moment, every unanswered message, every day that passes without a sign from you, the reality begins to sink in. You're not playing a game. You're protecting your peace. What you need to understand is this. When you stop trying, you interrupt his control. Not because you're punishing him, but because you're choosing yourself. And that choice confuses him. Because to someone who's been conditioned to expect your pursuit, your absence is unsettling. It challenges his pride. It shakes the foundation he stood on. The belief that he didn't have to change because you would never leave. He's not just checking your socials because he's curious. He's trying to make sense of a version of you he didn't think existed. The version that doesn't need him. The version that's not waiting. The version that's smiling, glowing, and no longer explaining herself. That's what really gets him. Not your silence alone, but the strength within it. The way you're walking forward without needing to announce your departure. And now he's trapped in that mental loop. Why did she really stop? Did I push her too far? Is she over me? He replays old conversations in his mind, searching for clues. He tries to find the exact moment you gave up, except he doesn't realize it wasn't one moment. It was the accumulation of many, the dismissive tones, the broken promises, the times you swallowed your hurt just to keep the peace. It was the slow erosion of your spirit every time he made you feel small for loving him so loudly. But here's the truth. Your silence is not an empty space. It's a mirror, one that reflects his choices back to him. And he's finally seeing the gap between what he thought he gave and what he actually did. You were consistent, loyal, you tried, you communicated, you showed up. And now that you've stopped, he's not just missing you, he's grieving the version of himself that only existed because of your effort. Now, every part of his routine feels off. The texts don't come. The comfort is gone. He wonders, who's on your mind? Who's in your corner now? And that wonder slowly becomes torment, not because you're being cruel, but because he knows he had a chance and he wasted it. You see, when someone takes you for granted, they believe your presence is permanent. But the day you stop trying, the day you go quiet, that's when they realize they were never entitled to your love. They were privileged to have it. And it's that realization that hits hardest. Because once you reclaim your energy, once you redirect your love inward, there's no going back to the version of you that begged for the bare minimum. He's haunted not just by what he lost, but by what he didn't protect. And that will echo in his mind far longer than any words you could have said. It's not just your silence that affects him, it's the power behind it. It's the realization that the one person who used to over-explain, overextend, and overlove is now the one who no longer reaches out, no longer waits for a reply, no longer argues just to be heard. And that quietness, that calm in your spirit is louder than anything you've ever said. You see, when you stop trying, you're not just creating space. You're taking your power back. You're no longer dancing to the rhythm of his indecisiveness. You're no longer shrinking yourself to make him feel secure. And the moment you chose to go still, to pull back, to stop giving your energy to someone who wasn't matching it, That's when he began to feel it. Because when you were trying, he had control. You were available, predictable. He knew he could hurt you and you'd still reach out. He knew you'd check in, follow up, ask questions, offer grace. But now he's the one checking his phone. He's the one pacing in his thoughts. He's the one wondering what happened to her. The power shift doesn't come from making him miss you. It comes from not needing him to. It comes from you finding peace without validation, from no longer needing closure or an apology to move forward. That's where your strength becomes undeniable. And that strength, that's what shakes him. He never imagined a version of you that could walk away with grace instead of drama. He didn't prepare for a woman who chooses healing over chaos. And now the very silence that used to scare you, now it protects you. It elevates you. It speaks for you. And here's what haunts him the most. He knows you're not punishing him. He can't label you as bitter. He can't call you angry because your silence isn't laced with spite. It's rooted in clarity. And nothing is more intimidating than a woman who walks away with her dignity intact and her peace guarded. When you stop trying, he starts remembering not just the good times, but the efforts you made, the chances you gave, the loyalty you offered without conditions. And for the first time, he's forced to admit to himself that it wasn't you who failed. It was him who didn't value what he had. Now he sees you differently. You're not the emotional, needy woman he once labeled. You're the woman who gave him her best and left when it became clear he wasn't ready to grow. That truth sits heavy on his chest because no contact isn't about getting back at him. It's about getting back to yourself. And the more you glow in your silence, the more he feels the weight of your absence. That's the beauty of walking away in your power. It teaches without speaking, it heals without proving, and it transforms without chasing.
Let that silence continue to speak volumes.
When you stop explaining yourself, you stop giving him something to argue with, to dismiss, or to spin in his favor. And that's when he starts feeling the pressure of the truth he can no longer avoid. See, silence doesn't just mean you've gone quiet. It means you've grown tired. Tired of justifying your heart, tired of defending your intentions, tired of breaking yourself down so someone else can feel comfortable not rising. He's used to the version of you who poured her soul into texts at 2 a.m., trying to explain why you were hurt. He remembers the long voice notes, the late night calls, the paragraphs where you tried to help him understand how deeply you were affected. But now all of that is gone. And what he's left with is the echo of his own choices. What shakes him isn't your absence, it's the way you left the conversation. You didn't slam the door. You didn't curse his name. You just stopped giving him an audience. And that, to a man who's relied on your emotional investment, is terrifying. Because now he has to sit in silence and deal with the reality he used to escape from by deflecting, blaming, and dodging accountability. And what makes this even more powerful is that your silence is not passive. It's intentional. It's a declaration of self-worth. When a woman stops explaining herself, it means she's finally realized that her value doesn't require anyone else's understanding, that her truth doesn't need to be argued into existence. She no longer needs his agreement to feel seen, and that rattles him. Because now he starts questioning himself. He replays every moment where he dismissed your emotions, where he called you too much or too sensitive, and suddenly it's all too quiet. No more calls, no more updates, no more trying, and the silence becomes a mirror he can't look away from. You see, when you stop explaining, you strip him of the role of the judge. You're no longer asking him to validate your experience. You're no longer waiting for his understanding. And without that power, he has nothing left to lean on. He can't control the narrative anymore because the woman who once asked to be understood is now too focused on understanding herself. And this is where growth becomes undeniable. When your energy is no longer spent trying to be heard, it's redirected into building, healing, glowing. You become harder to reach, not out of spite, but out of evolution. You've simply outgrown the need to convince someone of your worth. And that shift is what makes him wonder if he ever really knew you at all. Let him sit with that silence. Let him wrestle with the absence of your explanations. Because in that stillness, he's not just missing your words. He's realizing the weight of the words he never listened to. When you stop showing up for someone who took your presence for granted, it hits differently. It's not loud. It doesn't come with a warning. It's quiet, but unforgettable. When you stop texting first, stop checking in, stop making sure they're okay while you're falling apart, it creates a space, a void. And suddenly the one who always thought you'd be there starts to notice the silence more than they ever noticed your effort. You see, men don't always realize what they have when you're giving it. They recognize it when it's gone. When you go silent, not to manipulate, not to punish, but because your soul has had enough, that's when the shift happens. He starts to look around and notice things he never paid attention to. The good morning messages that no longer come. The soft check-ins. The way you used to celebrate his small wins. Support him in silence and love him loudly. All gone. And in that space, he starts questioning everything. Not because you said anything, but because you didn't. And that's the most powerful part of your evolution. You're not explaining why you stopped. You're just not there. And that creates a storm in his mind. He replays memories, tries to guess the moment you detached, wonders if he pushed too hard or cared too little. The very peace he once took for granted now haunts him. This is the mastery of no contact, not because it's about games, but because it's about growth. You're not doing this to get a reaction. You're doing this to reclaim your emotional energy, because you've realized that constantly proving your love to someone who isn't ready to receive it is the fastest way to lose yourself. And here's what really gets him. Your silence forces him to feel what you felt, the waiting, the uncertainty, the ache of being ignored, the confusion of not knowing where you stand. Now he checks your stories, rereads old messages, watches who you're becoming, hoping for a sign that you still care. But he won't find it. Because you're not waiting anymore. You're rising. You're creating a life where you don't chase, beg, or explain, where your peace is louder than any paragraph you could have written, where your absence says everything your words used to scream. That's what haunts him. And it should. When you stop trying and he realizes you're no longer emotionally available the way you once were, something shifts deep inside him. And it's not just guilt or confusion. It's fear. Fear that he's finally lost the one woman who truly saw him, who accepted him without conditions, who kept showing up even when he didn't always deserve it. That fear doesn't come immediately. It builds slowly, like a storm approaching on a quiet night. At first, he tells himself that maybe you're just having a mood swing. Maybe you're giving him space. Maybe you'll reach out again, like always. He relies on the pattern, the habit. But then the days pass and nothing comes. No text, no call, no accidental like on his story, nothing. And that's when the anxiety begins. That's when he starts to spiral. He doesn't say anything out loud. He keeps up appearances, but behind those casual posts and half-hearted distractions, he's checking, watching, waiting, trying to figure out if he misread your silence or if you've truly pulled away. And here's the part that really gets him. It's not that you've gone silent, it's that your energy is gone. You're no longer available. Your heart isn't open to him the way it used to be. And that's what keeps him up at night. Because men don't chase what's always been there, they chase what's no longer accessible. And now you've become a mystery, you've become unpredictable, And that haunts him more than any argument ever could. He starts to replay the moments where you gave him grace, where you forgave him without words, where you smiled through the pain. He remembers the warmth in your eyes when you looked at him like he was the only man on earth. And now he wonders, who gets that look now? Who gets that peace you used to pour into him? He won't say it. He may not even show it publicly. But inside, he's panicking because he realizes something he never considered before. You're not pretending to move on. You actually are. You're no longer doing things to be seen. You're not waiting for him to notice your growth. You're just growing quietly, powerfully. And that silence has a way of screaming into every corner of his mind. It forces him to reflect, not just on what you did, but on what he didn't do. The missed chances, the ignored texts, the dismissive responses when you were just trying to love him better. He starts to see the full picture now, and it's not pretty, because it shows him a man who thought love would stay forever just because it was patient. Now he's haunted by the one question he can't answer. What if she never comes back? And that's the power you reclaim when you stop chasing. When a woman who once gave everything finally walks away, her silence doesn't just echo, it leaves a permanent mark. And what he secretly feels in that silence, especially when he knows you're done trying, is not just regret. It's a deep, unsettling awareness that you've become the woman he always needed, but now can't reach. You see, there's something haunting about finality. And when you walk away with grace, without drama, without announcing your departure, it creates a void that words can't fill. He starts to feel it in the quiet moments, late at night, when he's scrolling his phone and pauses on your name, when he replays old messages, trying to decode where things started slipping. Not because he wants closure, but because he's realizing you gave him something rare. You gave him access to your softness, your loyalty, your belief in him, and he took it for granted. He didn't know how to hold it. He didn't protect it. And now the door has quietly shut. The truth is, when you stop trying, you shift the dynamic. You are no longer the one reaching, fixing, explaining. You've stepped into your power. You've chosen peace over chaos. And that disrupts everything he was comfortable with. Because chasing requires discomfort. And now, for the first time, he's the one sitting in that discomfort, wondering if it's too late to fix what he broke. What's worse, it's not just about losing you. It's about realizing who he became in your absence. The silence has a way of revealing truth. He starts to see his own emotional immaturity, his lack of effort, the dismissive words, the times he shut you down when you just needed to be heard. And that mirror, it's unforgiving. It shows him the version of himself he never wanted to face. And let's be honest, your silence isn't about punishing him. It's about protecting your energy. It's about choosing yourself for the first time in a long time. It's about walking away without bitterness because you've grown beyond the need for closure or apology. That level of peace is powerful and deeply unsettling for someone who thought you'd never leave. It starts imagining what you're doing now, who you're becoming, who's experiencing the version of you that he helped shape through his neglect. And that thought, it haunts him because he realizes something profound. You're not the same woman who once begged to be seen. You've evolved, you've healed, and now you've become untouchable, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. That realization doesn't just hurt, it humbles him, because now everything reminds him of you, the songs, the silence, the things he used to ignore, and he knows deep down you gave him chance after chance. You stayed longer than you should have, and when you finally let go, it wasn't because you stopped caring, it was because you started caring about yourself more. And that's the moment he understands your absence isn't a loss for you, it's his.